Starting off, can you tell me your name and where you came into this world to embark on the life you have created?
My name is Eileen Rose Spencer. I was born in the Wellsboro Hospital on September 30th, 1945.
What are some information about your parents as well as any siblings that you had?
My father's name was Clayton Lloyd Spencer. He was born on April 21st, 1919. My mother's name is Ina Elizabeth Button, and she was born on August 18th, 1923. My sister's name was Luella Louise Spencer, and she was born on March 2nd, 1943. She was also born at the Wellsboro Hospital. 10 years ago, my sister passed away from diabetes and was exactly 1 week after her leg was cut off because of health reasons, and she never came to. Growing up, I always felt closer to my father, while my sister was closer to my mother.
Can you tell me some information about your grandparents?
My grandmother on my mother's side was Lydia Mae Hackett. She was born at home in Wellsboro area at a pound and a half. They put her in the oven with the door open to be their incubator. She was married at the age of 14 to Henry Button and had her fourth child at the age of 21. Her first 3 children were stillborn. I didn't know my grandfather because they got divorced before I was born. On my dad's side, my great-great-great-grandfather came over before the Revolutionary War. He is buried in the Wellsboro Cemetery, as well as my grandmother and my grandfather, who lived on Horse Thief Run. And now the great-nephew owns their farm. My grandmother passed away in 1938, and my grandfather passed away in 1934, so I never met them.
Can you tell me about some memories with your Grandma Button?
She was always fun to stay over with, although we weren't allowed to stay until her second husband passed away because he was physically abusive, and she was very protective of her grandchildren from him. One time, Mom's dad bought my sister and I purple velvet dresses for Christmas. So Dad bought us a perfectly matching coat for it to go with them. My grandmother worked at Corning Glass and would always take a bus from Wellsboro to Corning. She was a sweetheart. She would always make fudge with us.
What were some things your parents did as occupations as well as common activities?
My father had a lot of roles. He was a great man who would do anything for anyone and made sure none ever went hungry. He was quite he wasn't quite wealthy, but he worked hard. He took care of things with the farm, did a lot of woodworking. He worked in the tannery. He was a photographer. He stayed continuously busy as well as helping so many families out. That was one of the biggest memories, was how he always had families living with us, cycling through, as well as abundance of food on the table. We loved helping people out, and he loved kids a lot. I feel like those are 2 big traits I carry from him to this day. He also helped Mom, as well as my sister and I, with carrying water up to the house every day because there was no running water. My mother's role was a housewife. She always took care of the cooking and cleaning, as well as raising my sister and I and all the extra kids.
Can you tell me about your family memories in life growing up?
I remember being blind for a few years before I started school. It was probably because I had measles very young. So seeing everything for that time of my life was fuzzy. So my mother would always fix my plate, and she had lied to me about what she gave me. I realized she put beans on my plate, and I said to my mother, "These are beans." And my dad immediately handed me his glasses, and that's when I started seeing everything again. My dad was big into cars, and he had an old 40s Ford car that had just 2 seats, and us girls used to ride in the window in the back, and we went for a lot of drives that way, laying in the back window. He also had a turquoise and white 55 Ford, and he had a 49 Lincoln Zephyr, which you hardly ever see now. We got our first TV set when I was about 5 years old, so every Saturday night I would sit on my father's lap while watching wrestling with my sister and mother. We often watched it with the other families that would be staying with us at the time. When I hit the age of about 7 or 8, we permanently moved up to the farm in Little Marsh. So also where I went to school, and I would get up at 5 o'clock every day to help milk the cows and to get my dad's breakfast. I raised chickens, then pigs. I would sell the pigs for school clothes, and I had a pig named Susie. She would always have 13 piglets, and one would always die. I would wrestle a lot with my cousins because that's all we had growing up. Oh, I was older than my cousin by less than a year. Gerald Spencer gave me a concussion because of how rough we got. When I had that head concussion, my dad would try to feed my pig, but they wouldn't eat for him. When he told me she wouldn't, I told him to mix the dog food with it because they always would want it instead of their actual food. Besides selling them, I even raced the pigs. We grew our own food, oats and corn, and then we would shell the corn, and we would grind it in our own grinder and then feed it to the pigs. We would do the combining and thrashing with the tractor. At one point, for a few days, the chickens disappeared, and I thought they were eaten by coyotes. But they came back eventually with twine on their legs, and they had pecked their way out because they had gotten tangled up from where they traveled to. Along with raising animals, we also always had dogs. First dog I remember was Cub. He was a white hunting dog killed by a car. We also had dogs named Jake, Bobby, and we had a blue tick hound. Another thing growing up was I loved ice skating. I remember once my parents weren't home when we got home from school, so I went out in my bathing suit and started skating. I thought I was a professional. I still watch ice skating on TV today. During the winter, we would have sledding parties on the weekends where all the kids would take the sleds and attach them to the tractor, and we would ride around. The neighborhood always called us crazy people. Growing up, since my sister and I were out on the farm, we were close because that's all we had. There were our 2 cousins who lived up the road, and we would always be exploring and doing things with. We wrestled a lot. My sister and I did a lot of gardening. I helped my father a lot with his activities, and I was always working with the big machinery, no matter how dangerous it was. A big thing we did as a family was picnics. As soon as my dad got off work, we went up to the state park even before the picnic tables, and we had full-blown cookout family dinners. No matter what the weather was, even when there was 3 foot of snow on the ground, we did it anyway. Little things like that kept me happy.
What are some more important memories to you growing up?
I always was doing things every day, but living with my dad, I got to do a lot of fun things. He taught me how to tap trees and make maple syrup. I loved cooking with maple syrup, and I still do. We also would pick wild strawberries every year, harvesting about 52 quarts. We had so many jams made, and strawberry shortcakes were a favorite. I felt on top of the world growing up, running around shooting toy pistols, riding our broken buggy down hills, riding other machines all the time, making adventures.
Can you tell me about any of your extended family members and why they were so important to you?
My father-in-law was such a good man. His name was Andy Van Dusen. He was a protective man who would hand out $100 bills just because. When I went to prom, he bought me my dress in Corning. It was such a beautiful flowing princess dress that was teal and had huge puffy sleeves. The best part was it was $5. It was the only one, and I was small enough to fit in it. I also remember my Uncle Malin would wink both eyes at me, so I would do the same back all the time. He also taught me as a baby to suck my toe instead of my thumb.
What similarities do you see between your grandparents and you?
I see similarities with my grandmother because she loved to sew, and so do I. She also was cooking, could cook anything, and it was good. She had 18 kids and did as much as she could for them, and I feel like that carried on to me.
What about similarities between yourself and your parents?
I look like my mother and built like her. We both have funny knees and lucked out with being skinny. My sister was the one who clicked more with my mother's personality, as I feel that I was more like my dad. His work ethics on to me. He passed his work ethics on to me and my kids. I also carried an angry temper from him, but also his well-mannered communication. My interest with being a machinist came from him as well, and I wish I could go back to them.
What are some of your holiday stories?
During Easter, the one year when we were living in Elkland, I was upset because my sister found all the Easter eggs. When I got upset, my father said, "Don't be upset. Go feed the chickens." When I did, they all had laid colored eggs, and it made me happy. We had lots of beautiful holidays, but we celebrated Christmas the biggest. It is always going to be my favorite holiday to celebrate. One year, my dad was sick of the Seventh-day Adventists, so when they had come to the house one year, he invited them to eat and come in, and they never came back because they were so cut off. My sister was always the one who put the top on the tree. So one year I wanted a tinier tree so I could reach to put the top on it. But the stand made it still too big for me to put the top on. My dad bought a big gift for each of us girls, and one year he told us he played with it every day. My sister and I kept guessing and ended up being a bow and arrow. When I was 12, I received my first pair of new ice skates. My dad always made sure to get a gift specially for my sister and I from only him. My mom got my sister and I sweaters and matching skirts, and that was wool and pleated, and I got blue because I was blonde and my sister got red.
What are some other gifts that you had gotten unrelated to Christmas?
My dad gave me a gift in high school during career day. He bought me a white dress with gold trim on his way home from work. Everyone thought it was pretty. Honestly, birthdays weren't big growing up, so we never did any presents for them.
Can you tell me about your favorite foods growing up and who made them?
My mother always made sugar cookies. She always made cinnamon rolls every day, and I could smell them after getting off the school bus. She also made the best homemade pudding. When my first husband wanted the recipe, she said yes and gave it to him, but with no measurements. I loved her mashed potatoes as well. Dinner was always included pork and beef. Now my dad always made the best butter and cottage cheese. I loved eating it.
Did your family go on any family trips?
We didn't travel much. We only ever went to Erie to see my mom's uncle once, and we stayed overnight, and that was it. My father really did not like traveling.
Moving on to talk about your teenager memories, what was school like?
First, I went to Elkland, and I really did not like it there. The kids were more difficult to get along with, and the teachers were not as nice. And I felt like they were better than everyone. We moved to Little Marsh when I was in 3rd grade, and I loved it so much more. The teachers were so much nicer there. There were 3 grades in the classroom at a time, but they were all friendly kids. Walking the 5 miles to school was fun when we could get away with it during the nice weather. Other times we just rode the bus.
Mm-hmm. What was it like being a teenager?
It was boring. All there was work. I hardly ever went to school dances because my sister didn't like them, and she was the one with the driver's license. She would always tell our parents we were going to the dances, but we would go to the movies instead. And I didn't like movies. There was a secret we kept from my dad when driving his car before. She backed into a ditch, and we didn't tell our parents. And eventually, our dad came in telling our mom that the springs were broken, and we were so guilty. We told them that what we had done, and my dad assured us and said they were needing to be changed for a while, so we were okay. But my dad appreciated us telling him the truth.
What are some memories you keep from those years?
I was a candidate for Miss Christmas the one year. We got to stay up, eat food, and stand in the window of Rosenblum's store. The whole event would end with a big ball. My dress was straight down with white color. After, when we got to wear pajamas and sleep over with breakfast in the morning of whatever we wanted.
What was your dating life like?
I had my kind of first boyfriend in 3rd grade named Gordy, and he lived next door. We would always go outside and in the woods. My next boyfriend was Philip, was in the same year, and we would always pass notes that were cliche, like, I love you, do you love me? Circle yes or no. The boyfriend after that was when I was 12, and we were going to the Grange a lot together. After that came my first husband, whom I met in high school. I was 14 and married 2 months after I graduated, and I was 18. It was 1964 to 1992, 27 years, being divorced at 45. My first husband was not a good person. After that, I was 17 years single. But then I found John, and I've been married for 10 years now. The way we met was through family in 1999. It was John's girlfriend's son, and we ended up riding with my daughter Beth, son-in-law Ray, and John's girlfriend's son. For our first date, we went to the Grand Canyon, and then he took me out for ice cream. He forgot his wallet, so I ended up buying. I was 53 at the time, while John was 43. We married in September 2nd, 2007, although we had been living together before that, because I honestly did not want to be married again and just focused on myself. It's been a great relationship, and we have traveled so much together. It is shocking to me. The first place we traveled was the Bahamas on a cruise. Then we went to places such as the Keys in Florida, Branson, Virgin Islands, Aruba, Puerto Rico, Arizona, Chincoteague in Canada. John is a good man. He's well known with teaching classes for being an EMT, and he was a Penn State graduate. And on November 23rd, it will make 5 years since he got into a horrible farm tractor accident. Out of 5 people dying, he was the only one to survive. A brush hog had gone over him, and he still has surgeries and checkups with the doctors over it today.
What was your first job like?
I worked in the strip mall of Middlebury at the place called Hathrill's Restaurant as a dishwasher. I really didn't like it because of the boss. I was 13 or 14, getting paid 95 cents an hour, which was really good. I really spent the money on my grandma.
What about some other employment?
After I worked at Hathrill's, we started an auction business. My husband was an auctioneer, but mainly the antique store when it wasn't Saturday night. After that, when I was 22 or 23, it was Remington Rand, where we made typewriters. Then I went to Thatcher Glass because I was laid off for 6 months. I inspected glass bottles there. I was getting sick a lot after that because I found out I was pregnant. Then I found out. Later on, I went to Ingersoll Rand because Thatcher closed. I worked there for a couple months before going to A&P, which did food for grocery stores. I was in the factory for it though, making boxed chocolates. After that, I went to Metamora for 2 years, where I burned my fingers on the shutters. Then we owned a Montgomery Ward store for 10 years. I would work at Electrocord at night while working in the store during daytime. And after Electrocord, I went to Ingersoll Rand. I loved it there. I made great money, loved the work, and loved the bosses. I stayed there 32 years, up until I retired, and sometimes I miss it still and want to go back. At one point, I was even a teacher's aide for a year, but I really did not like it. If I had to say the one general thing I learned working was people like you if you show up.
Now we move on to your favorite thing about life, family. Can you tell me about your first spouse and life being married to him?
I met him at a Grange meeting, and after the meeting, he went home and told his mom he was going to marry me. We got married July 25th, 1964. We had lived in our first house right after we had gotten married. It was a 2-room house, and we had our first child, Clayton, on June 21st, 1965. He would always run back and forth in the tiny house, and we realized we wanted a second child, but did not have the room. So we decided to buy our first home in 1967. It was 3-bedroom place, and then we ended up having our second child, Beth, on February 11th, 1968. After Beth, we had our third child, Amy, who was born on February 25th, 1971, and our last child, Dana, on April 16th, 1973. We then decided to take the family and move to the farm in 1978. Something I learned from being married to the first time is always making sure you can depend on yourself first. I always told my kids that too. I had never been much of a fighter, so that wasn't a big thing, but it is hard work, and you have to keep working together and by yourself. Both people in the relationship need to keep a job and keep a good marriage.
What things do you love about your now husband, John T. Eric?
He loves to travel, and he was always good with all my grandchildren. When I knew I loved him, we had went out to eat the first time with my grandchildren, Andrew and Marina. We went to Chinese, and he didn't want to eat right away to make sure they could eat whatever they ordered. Then another time we went out for Marina's birthday and went to the steakhouse in Wellsboro. He was so amazed that Andrew and Marina could also always order something to share and love it. They ended up ordering a seafood platter, and all 5 of us were able to share the whole thing. He loved taking them out to eat, especially because it was always so perfect like that. I knew he cared about them, and that made me so happy.
What about holidays as you raising your children as well as their families and being grown up now?
When they were growing up, we would celebrate Christmas Eve because we would have so many people come, ending up with 30 plus people for dinner. Christmas was meant for just the family. We would eat in the living room Christmas Eve and would always make candles out of bananas, pineapple, whipped cream, and cherries. We would also have Shirley Temples. Now we always love to celebrate holidays, and we trade off those whose house we go to. The adults always tell me not to get them gifts, but just for the kids. But I still do give them gifts. Our family is tight, and we will always stay close with celebrating and being with each other for holidays.
Have you guys had any family trips growing up, and any trips with your children at their grown-up age?
When the kids were growing up, we only ever went to one place, Disneyland. Dana was the only one who didn't want to go, so when I told the kids no fighting or we would go home, Dana would try to start fights because he didn't like traveling. On our way down, the car broke down right in the middle of the highway, and it was scary. Eventually, when we were there, I had lost Amy, and a random man who worked at Disney walked through the store with her on his shoulders to help her find us. Now we travel a lot more with the children grown up, and we use time shares to get around to places. We have all traveled to Canada, Edisto, Tennessee, Chincoteague. When we went to Chincoteague, Andrew ordered alligator and said it tasted like chicken. Amber had crawled up all the steps to our rental homes so she wouldn't fall. John was worried at one point when we were riding bikes that the kids couldn't keep up. When we started, Andrew almost hit Marina, and was so upset he tried to refuse to ride.
What did you love most about being a parent?
I loved holidays, my babies. I loved holding my babies. I always loved working to make money to spend on them, as well as cooking food for them. I couldn't afford everything, but I tried to get anything I could for them.
What do you love most about being a grandparent?
Hugs. And them telling me how much they love me. I really love buying stuff and helping them. I love taking them on trips. We got to go diving and swimming in the Virgin Islands before, and I loved it.
What are the birth dates for all your grandchildren? What are some memories you have with them?
There's Amber, who was born October 22nd, 1988. Then Andrew, who was born on September 4th, 1991. After Andrew, it was Chris, March 10th, 1990. Then Kyle on May 17th, 1992. Then it was Rachel on March 15th, 1992. After Rachel was Marina on September the 29th, 1995. Then Marissa on December 28th, 2000. Then Katie on May 14th, 2004. And lastly, it was Xander on June 11th, 2012. And our newest baby, born December 27th, 2017. I love all of them. I love the time we have spent from traveling and all the small family picnics we have had. It is every time that is my favorite memory. The one time I remember taking Amber, Andrew, Kyle to an art show, and Kyle kept running away. They were all amazing kids with drive and will all grow up so successful with their lives.
How would you describe your family?
We are all outgoing and social with each other and with others. We are very close and love spending time with each other. I have very smart children and grandchildren. We also have been a part of 4-H and all exchange our 4-H trophy between homes. We have had kids stay through the exchange program with 4-H.
What are your hobbies nowadays?
I love to sew, macrame, cook, and decorate cakes. I love making birthday cakes and wedding cakes.
Angie.
I volunteer as an EMT with John and do that every Wednesday. It has shown me so much with people and brought me a lot of light.
What is your faith?
I'm a Methodist, while John is a Catholic.
What are your friendships like nowadays?
I have a lot of friends from the Rand. I have a lot of girlfriends, and I have a lot of guy friends. I also have some friends from the fire department. John's friends are my friends, but I don't hang out with them unless I'm hanging out with John or I hang out with their wives. My friends and I call each other regularly. I still have a friend from high school, Sandy Baker. My sister and cousins from growing up and family have passed away. It is hard when you're so far into the wilderness, and I am even further back now than when I was growing up.
Do you remember any world events from growing up?
I remember when JFK was killed. I was walking to my cousin's after school, and some lady picked me up, and she told me about it, and I was so shocked. There was so much discussion on the Kennedys, and they got away with so much, especially murder, because they were rich. The first election I remember was Eisenhower, and the first election I was in, I voted for Nixon.
When were you the happiest?
Have to say I was the happiest when I lived with Beth and Dana. We always had lots of family visits. I was 35 at the time, and we all played
played our role living together. I would do dishes and cooking while Beth cleaned, and Dana would clean the cars, and we would put money together, and we all got along so much there. There was never fighting. I felt so peaceful, and I had my freedom to do whatever I wanted to do day to day.
Coming to an end, what do you see when you look at your future?
I expect to get old like my mother, but I don't want it. I hope I don't act like my mom, because I want to have my mind, and I will put myself into a nursing home before I get too bad. John wants to travel, and it is hard because I am still taking care of my mother. I haven't been able to do as much because she needs me. I hopefully want to go to Germany and England again and see Australia, Iceland, and Italy one day if I live long enough.
Thank you for your time and telling me about your precious stories. It has been a pleasure, and I admire your beautiful experience through life.